Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 33, noes 7.
Ayes 33, noes 7. House Bill 1620 passes.
House Bill 2034, a bill relating to general registrars, petition for removal. Reported from the Committee on Privileges and Elections with an amendment.
Senator from Fauquier, Senator Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption of the amendment, please.
Thank the Senator. The question is, shall the committee amendment be adopted? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee amendment is adopted. Senator from Fauquier, Senator Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a bill that is supported by the registrars. It is believed, I think, by most people to be both good for registrars and for electoral boards, and it adds an element of due process for the removal of registrars. And what the bill effectively does is it takes it to circuit court, and it allows a registrar to sort of litigate that process on the front end rather than on the back end. And I think most people believe it's a fairer process and incorporates more transparency. And so with that, I would ask that the bill pass.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does Senator from Bath, Senator Deeds rise?
To speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, Virginia is an employment at will state. That means as long as you don't discriminate, you can hire or fire anybody you want to for any reason you want to. Registrars are hired by electoral boards. I want you to read this bill very carefully. I know that you have, because we're carving out a group of people, a group of public employees from that employment at will doctrine. Now, I don't know if you think that's good policy. If you do, that's fine. But if you do, there might be another bill next year.
Thank the Senator. For what purpose does Senator from Fairfax City, Senator Peterson, rise?
Gentlelady, yield for a question.
Will Senator yield?
I'm happy to yield, Mr. President.
Senator yields. You have the floor.
I'd ask the gentlelady, currently, the electoral board solely decides who serves as registrar, correct?
That's absolutely right.
There's the floor. Further
question. And I'd ask the gentlelady, so if for some reason they became dissatisfied with them, let's say the registrar posted on Facebook a comment that was critical about the electoral board or one of the elected officials that might call into question their impartiality, the electoral board could just fire them on the spot, correct?
That's absolutely right, Mr. President.
Further question.
Further question.
So my question then is, if we institute this law, aren't we essentially delaying? I mean, we're creating an exception to the at-will. Now only a circuit court judge can terminate that employment. Is that what I understand?
So, the floor.
So, Mr. President, I think that, again, what the bill is attempting to do is not necessarily to stand in the way of the board's ability to remove somebody for a proper reason, but to prevent what I think some communities have found to be a problem, a real problem, and that is it's undermining the ability of registrars to act fairly and impartially. They feel a lot of pressure, perhaps, from electoral boards. This just allows an element of due process to that process. And certainly if the termination was appropriate, I think that a circuit court judge would support that electoral board decision, and I think it would be swift, and I don't believe that it's meant to be a roadblock to that process.
Just speak briefly to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try not to duplicate my brilliant colleague, Senator Deeds, but here's the bottom line. The electoral board basically will decide what the community does, and the registrar serves at their sufferance, just like the city or county manager serves at the sufferance of a city council or a county board. And I think if you start putting in impediments to terminating somebody that for whatever reason loses the confidence of their governing board, I mean, who knows where this could end? We could have county managers we couldn't get rid of, or city managers. So I think, much as I hate to say it, I think this kind of cuts against democracy to have this bill.
Do any other senators wish to be heard on House Bill 2034?
Mr. President, if I may.
Senator from Fauquier, Senator Vogel.
Just to respond, because I know the folks who've worked on this bill, both registrars and electoral board members, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't just offer an explanation. What you're doing with this piece of legislation is you are putting the registrars effectively in the same position that electoral board members are in now, because this is exactly the same process that an electoral board member goes through to be terminated. And in the case that I think really was the genesis of this legislation, what happened was the person went through the process. It was determined that they were wrongfully terminated, but that process was then resolved on the back end. And it cost a registrar an enormous amount of money, and it was not the most effective way to deal with that. So this just moves it to the front end of that process. And I think the registrars would be disappointed if I didn't point that out. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank the senator. For what purpose, the senator from King George, Senator Stewart, rise?
Mr. President, I apologize to the gentlelady, but could this go by temporarily?